Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Jananim Sharadam Devi Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Sritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu Namasri Etirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satyasukha Swarupaya Swamini Tapahari. So today is probably the last online class before summer. May, June, generally we don't conduct any class. So in July, we will start offline classes, hopefully by the time all this corona etc. would have subsided. But again, announce at the end of the class because so far only 2 people are attending. So now today we saw in great detail the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the various incidents, his extraordinary devotion, how he inspired such a large number of people and so on. Now we shall look at the philosophy, the Sri Krishna Chaitanya philosophy. It's called Achintya Bheda Abheda. There is not recognizable and identity in difference. Achintya is that's something which you cannot recognize, or it is inconceivable. And identity is abheda. Bheda is difference. So inconceivable, identity in difference. The title looks a little complicated, but we'll see it in great detail today. So you see, normally, Vedanta is identified with Kevala Advaita, the absolute non-dualism of Shankara. But there are so many other interpretations of Vedanta. Primarily, those by Vaishnava Acharyas have gained prominence from time to time. So, first of all, let us look at some of the basic differences in the interpretation of the Vedanta. In Shankara's non-dualism, the supreme spiritual reality is attributeless, indeterminate, and cosmic absolute. That is Nirgun, Nirakar, Brahman. But the Vaishnavas, it is the supreme person, the absolute or the ultimate supreme reality is a supreme person who is the repository of all auspicious qualities and is the Lord and the Master of creation. So they believe in a personal God, so it is supreme person. So in the Shankara Advaita, God is accepted but is distinguished from the absolute. Is only provisionally accepted till he is finally sublated and given away in the course of vichara, discriminatory process. So God is only a temporary proposition, but in the case it's to be negated at the level of the paramarthika. In the Vyavharika, the Ishvara is highest, is accepted and all that, but at the highest ultimate, namely paramarthika, Ishvara is also given up. It's only that supreme reality or the absolute Brahman. So because the lowest as well as the highest, everything in the phenomenal world or everything we conceive of or think of is mithya or only appearance. So, they all go into oblivion or sink into paramarthika or the highest idea, view of truth. But for the Vaishnavas, God is the ultimate reality as revealed by the Vedantic text. There is no absolute apart from God is the ultimate absolute for them. So there is no independent existence or superior entity apart from him. So no sublation of God in any form is acceptable to them. So in the Kevala Advaita, Jiva in its essence, after elimination of all the other adjuncts, the body, mind, egotism, etc., and Ishvara, once again, after the elimination of his own adjuncts, namely his power of cosmic manifestation, etc., they all both constitute the identical non-dual Brahman. Jiva and Ishvara both are essentially identical non-dual Brahman. But and in both cases, in the case of Ishvara as well as Jiva, the adjuncts or qualities, etc., are unreal. But in the Vaishnavas, Jiva is a part, is an aspect of the attribute of Brahman, is distinguishable but not necessarily different. Jiva in sense is distinguishable but not different from God. Some hold him to be distinct both in bondage and liberation, salvation, while in some others they say that the only in the bondage the distinction is there. In liberation, the distinction will cease because jiva merges with the highest idea of God, just as rivers merge in the ocean. So they accept the doctrine that upadhi or the adjunct uh, separates jivas from Brahmans only in ignorance. Because in ignorance, the clear jiva is perceived as a clearly different entity. Although it is there's one relationship and is considered as a part of the highest truth, namely the supreme person. Yet there's a clear distinction there. Whereas in liberation, they merge and the jiva merges with the supreme person or the Lord, and then the distinction goes away. So in the Kevala Advaita or the pure Advaita of Shankara, the creation is unreal. So it's even if it is accepted temporarily, it is denied afterwards. But the Vaishnava's creation is real and in every sense of the term. According to Kevala Advaita, samsara or the state of bondage and the release from it, bandhan mukti, maneva manushyanam karanam bandha moksha. Mind alone is responsible for the bondage as well as liberation. So in that ultimate that Advaita, these are all only uh, unreal assumptions resulting from ignorance, whereas the Vaishnavas hold these to be real states, this bondage. Thus, bondage is a real state and release is a real achievement to be had by appropriate means. In Advaita, jnana or knowledge of the unity of the Atman and Brahman is the means of salvation, whereas the Vaishnavas, bhakti, deep rooted devotion and dedication to God, is the means. Release from samsara or achievement of uh, that going beyond the body, going beyond the idea of birth and death, that is mukti, is the highest goal of Kevala Advaitins or pure Advaitins, whereas the Kainkarya or service of the Supreme Being in his eternal abode is the ideal of the most of the Vaishnava schools. So these are some of the basic differences between the traditional ideas of Advaita and that of the Vaishnava schools, be it as may be. So in the among the various Vaishnava schools, the Bengal school of Vaishnavism was inspired by the life and teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was he was really too full of God consciousness or love of God to undertake any work of philosophy, etc., etc. His time was only spent in divine ecstasies and sankirtanas and singing God's names, etc. So his object of love was Krishna, who, according to the Bhagavata, not merely an incarnation, but as the most perfect supreme Godhead. Krishna's to Bhagavan Swami is what is stated in the Bhagavata. So the pattern of love popularized by him is actually uh, Madhura Bhava, the conjugal love, which is represented in the Bhagavata Purana to the love of gopis of Vrindavan with Sri Krishna. The same way in the Chaitanya school of Vaishnavism or the Bengal school of Vaishnavism also, the bhava propagated or popularized by Sri Krishna Chaitanya is this Madhura Bhava. He did not, of course, preach any direct philosophical doctrine, but the conversations he held with his devotees and disciples were themselves very profound, profound enough for development of a philosophy. So what he failed to give by way of writing, he made up by the impact of his grand and ecstatic personality, the impression he made on his talented disciples. It was followed by several scholarly saints and philosophers who have presented to the world a distinctive form of metaphysics and theology that has come to be known as the Bengal school of Vaishnavism or the Achinta Bheda Bheda, inconceivable identity difference. Now, we have great scholars like Rupa, Sanatana, Jiva Goswami, and others, and also Baladeva. So, the system of this, the metaphysics of this system that claims to be Advayavada, the doctrine of one without a second. Dvaya and Advaita all mean no Dvaya, Advaya, without a second. According to which the Satchit Ananda Parabrahman, identified with Krishna, is the one supreme reality. Krishna is identified with Satchit Ananda Parabrahman, is a supreme reality. Krishna is the absolute person, indivisible, all inclusive, unlimited by any other entity beside him. So, Krishna, he has an ideal form. The brilliance of that form is what the Advaitins of Shankara school call unqualified impersonal Brahma. So, this is what the Chaitanya school of followers or the Bengal school of Vaishnava followers, this is what they call the, the supremely adorable form, the, the brilliance of which is only what is called by they say, what the Shankara school followers call as unqualified impersonal Brahman, they say it is nothing but the brilliance of the supreme form of Sri Krishna. So, of course, he is also supported by the Gita sloka, uh, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the pratishtha, I am the adhara, I am the basis, supporter of Brahman. Sri Krishna himself says. So, that statement matches this idea that the brilliance of Sri Krishna is the what's called the Advaita of the Kevala Advaitins, Brahman. So we will see, just as the brilliance of the sun is supported by the disk of the sun, there is a disk, the sun's brilliance is supported by the disk. Similarly, the Brahman of Advaita is only the Tanubhava, the surrounding brilliance of the consciousness bliss of Krishna supported by him. So Krishna's brilliance, consciousness is so extraordinary. The outermost is called the Tanubhava or the surrounding brilliance. That is, they say, is same as the uh, Advaita or the Advaita Brahman. Since the Nirvikalpa Jnana is the ultimate truth, and that the Savikalpa or the is false in the last analysis. Finally, only the Nirvikalpa idea is the highest ultimate truth, Nirvikalpa Jnana, and the Savikalpa, etc., are all to be negated and given up ultimately. This version is completely reversed in the Bengal school of Vaishnavism, that system. Why? That is because the indefinite awareness of anything is the most primitive and the most peripheral. See, supposing we look at something from a long distance, it appears as very hazy and at the periphery only. You are not able to see distinctly that particular thing. So, therefore, it is peripheral. Understanding of anything, so when the awareness becomes definite, clear, and defined, then only anything is fully understood. So, this is what they claim, the supreme reality, the Bhagavan, the divine personality, clear and defined, is a core reality. The indefinite and the unmodified Brahman can only be his peripheral Brahman, brilliance, or the Tanu Bhava. And infinite, see, because you see, the brilliance of the consciousness, the Chachit Ananda Swarup, that Krishna, the core personality, that is at the center, and that becomes visible only at the higher levels when you approach closer to him and nearer to him. What is seen as the distance is the brilliance, is the Tanubhava or the peripheral brilliance, and that they say is the Advaita Brahman of the Vedantics. So in that school, the Krishna he's the core, he's the center, his vision, his recognition, his realizations as the supreme reality or person, that is the ultimate. So that is how they came. So what the Advaitins claim as Brahman, they equate it to something hazy and unclear. Because everything looks like, see, from a distance, it all looks one. You don't see any distinction. Only when you go clear, nearer, when you are quite advanced in your path, when you approach near the truth, then really you get the highest knowledge, the highest vision. So that is why they say that that alone is the uh, final vision, and therefore that's what they are calling as the ultimate truth. So of course, then the question might be asked: how an infinite? If you say it's an infinite person, you say Krishna is full of consciousness, is Chaitanya. At the same time, you also claim Krishna to be a supreme person. So it may be a contradiction in terms of time and space. But they say that this is not so with regard to Krishna because he is transcendental spiritual reality within whom time and space are all included. All that you call, all that is all in the relative world, everything is included in the supreme reality called Sri Krishna. So he is a multi-form which can take any other form. He is beyond all these ideas of time and concession because they are all included in him. And therefore, in his case, there is absolutely no distinction between spirit and form. And he is so supreme that these things are not applicable to him. All these are all applicable only in the existential world or with our idea of perception, sight, sense, etc. etc. Of course, in every philosophy, there may be some difficulty, something which we are unable to explain. This will also be there, but this would look far and far and by the very reliable and more soothing philosophy, so to say. So, see this question, how the non dual reality of the Supreme can be understood in relation to the experience of the multiplicity which experience in everyday life. If the Brahman is only one supreme reality, ultimate reality, how do you explain the existential world with all its multiplicity which we experience every day? So, each school of Vedanta has its own answers. In the Shankara school, the manifold is explained as illusory manifestation, superimposed by ignorance on the non-dual substratum of the Brahman. Brahman kind of conditioned by ignorance, etc. That is why we see all this manifestation. And once that ajnana goes, ignorance goes, with the dawn of knowledge, all that would vanish and only the ultimate reality will be felt or experienced. This is a normal explanation which the Kevala Advaitins or pure Advaitins give. In the system of Ramanuja, the manifold is accepted either objectively or originally related to Ishvara. And Ishvara, along with all the manifold, forms a complete whole or the absolute, including himself. So, the existence, everything is accepted as part of this was called Vishishta Advaita. Advaita is there, but it's also Vishishtata in the sense that all these multiplicity is recognized as true and kind of related to or part of that absolute, which includes all that. So that is why they don't negate the world or don't call it as mithya, illusory, or anything. So in the Bengal school of Vaishnavism or the Chaitanya school of philosophy, the relationship is accepted as between Shaktimat and Shakti. Shaktimat is a wielder of power and Shakti is power. So entity and its power, that means Shaktimat, the wielder of power and power, are inseparably related and have an identity of idea of being in spite of the difference that could be made of them. For example, fire and its heat and light, etc., is potency expressing in heat and light, form an identical entity, although there is a distinction between them, which is also simultaneously evident. That's why they're very, very close to Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, this Bengal school of Vaishnavism. So, again, Tagore gives this example Agni and its Daika Shakti, the Agni and its power to burn, its light and heat, etc. So, the fire and these are, in one sense, you can see they are little distinct, they are different. But you also clearly see that they are uh, you cannot absolutely separate them as two different entities. They are inseparably linked. At the same time, you also see a small distinction. Fire is not same as the heat and light. Light is different, fire is different. So more clearly put by Sri Ramakrishna as Agni and its power to burn, Dahika Shakti. They are inextricably linked together. But then there's also a kind of a distinction. In the same way, the Supreme Reality Krishna, who is the Shaktimat, the wielder of the power, and the Shakti are the potency of the creation of the world. Their relationship is one of identity in difference because both the terms of relationship being equally real. The Supreme Person remains transcendental while Shakti projects the world of multiplicity. The Supreme Person, or Sri Krishna, the Shaktimat, he is not subject to any change, or there is nothing earthly or what you call the phenomenal world or the relative world about him, anything that way. He always remains the transcendental. But the Shakti or the power projects the world of multiplicity. The multiplicity is in and of Shakti and does not affect the Shaktimat or the wielder of the power, namely the Supreme Lord. At the same time, Shakti as the potency of the Supreme Person has no independent existence apart from him and constitutes a non-dual whole with him. See, can you think of the power of burning of Agni apart from the fire itself? They are inextricably linked. The same way, the Shakti or the supreme power of creating multiplicity is not totally different from the Supreme Person who is a Shaktimat. So the non-dual nature of the ultimate reality is thus secured to the concept of Shakti, which stands distinct from Shaktimat as the source of manifested world, while at the same time remaining non-different from the transcendent Shaktimat. Manifest is real and in not any way sense illusory. Not in any sense it is illusory or unreal. It is changeful but not illusory. The supreme reality can have, because the supreme reality can have no connection whatsoever with that which is anything false in any sense. So then, obviously, one might raise the following questions. If Shakti changes in real sense in the world, then it will surely be affected by the change because Shakti has become the world. So it is affected. If Shakti is affected, consequently, that being one with Shaktimat, the wielder, the modification of Shakti arising from the transformation into the world of multiplicity must be considered as is the modification of the Shaktimat or the wielder himself. So, in other words, the supreme reality or the supreme person loses its character. God ceases to be God as in all forms of pantheism. So, when you accept this idea, if you say that it is a Shakti which produces the multiplicity, that which produces the world, if that be so, and then because it changes and because you say it is real, so this change in turn should also affect the Shaktimat because the Shakti and Shaktimat are the power and the wielder of the power, namely the supreme reality as the supreme person, Sri Krishna. They are not different. So, in other words, the supreme nature of the Lord Himself is questioned here because He is also subject to some multiplicity, He is also subject to change. Obviously, when there is a change, there is decay, there is always impermanence, unreality comes in. So the supremely real nature of the Lord kind of goes away. So what do they do to counter this in the Shankara system of Advaita Vedanta? They take up the concept of apparent or illusory transformation, what is known as the Vivartavada as opposed to Parinamavada. It is not Parinama real transformation, it is Vivarta or the apparent transformation. Because when the manifold is only a superimposition on the ultimate reality, that reality, though forming the substratum of the illusory perception, is not affected by it. It's only a temporary imagined superimposition. It's not a real superimposition. It's purely temporary. So, the but this leads to problems in some other areas. If the transformation is only apparent, this apparency, what happens? This transformation of the Supreme Brahman through the superimposition of ignorance is leading to this apparent manifestation of the world, etc. But then this apparent manifestation is seen or deducted by whom? It's the wrong knowledge, it's the wrong reading of somebody or other. So either it must be done by the supreme reality itself or by some consciousness other than that. So, if you say, if you accept a consciousness other than Brahman is doing it, then the non-dual nature of Brahman is lost because there's another entity which has come into operation. On the other hand, if you say that this ignorance or this wrong reading is in the Brahman itself, then it is ignorance accrues to supreme reality. Then he is not of the nature of blemishless Shuddha Buddha Mukta Swabhava. It is not there. So the very defect which they are trying to remove brings in other problems. Therefore, so that is what in Advaita Vedanta the main problem is the locus of avidya. Where is avidya? Where is ignorance? Is it Brahm? Is it in Brahman or is it outside? It is outside. If you accept Ajnana, then there are two entities, namely Brahman and Ajnana. There is no non-duality. If you say it is within Brahman, then Brahman is also subject to Ajnana. Then it is not that supremely Shuddha Buddha Mukta Swabhava. It is not the nature. It's also the nature of ignorance. So all those defects come. So what do they say? So in the Bengal school of Vaishnavism, they reject this Mayavada. They don't accept it. So naturally, the superimposition ideas, etc., they accept. So in that case, so they say that it is the real transformation through his Shakti or this power of projection of the Lord. So it is not apparent, it is real. The world is the supremely real manifestation or the multiplicity created by the power, the Shakti of the supreme reality, namely Sri Krishna. But again, still the original problem remains. If Shakti is identical with Shaktimat, will not the real transformation of Shakti or the power equal to the transformation of the Shaktimat or the wielder of power, the Supreme Lord Himself? How do you contradict? How do you defend this? In reply, that's what they have propounded the doctrine of inconceivable identity in difference. Achintya Bheda Abheda. It is Achintya, it cannot be conceived of, cannot be recognized, cannot be solved that way. There is Bheda and also there is Abheda. Shakti is both identical and different from Shaktimat or the wielder of Shakti or the power. It's because the element of difference that the transformation of Shakti does not affect the Shaktimat. Because it is distinct from the, see, Bheda and Abheda. This Bheda is what, retains the supremely transcendental nature of the Shaktimat. But this Abheda is what gives real reality to the world itself. Because it is Abheda, non-different but the supreme truth or the ultimate person, namely Sri Krishna. So the world and all its manifestations are real in that sense. They don't say it is absolutely unreal because it's of its nature. So these two contradictory features, how can they coexist? This is not attempted to be explained logically. What is a contradiction? If you say that the transformation really happens in Shakti, the power, it should also be traced to the Shakti, but the wielder of the power, because Agni and its Daika Shakti are not different. So if the power is showing true transformation, becoming multiplicity, etc., unlike the Advaita Vedanta, where this is all apparent and illusory and all that, if you accept that transformation as real, then this transformation affects the Shaktimat, the wielder of the power, namely the Supreme Person himself. But at the same time, they say that they are same, and at the same time, there's a difference. Shakti and Shaktimat are in one sense, they are Abheda, in another sense, they are Bheda. This Bheda is what, because they are different, it helps the retention of the supremely transcendental nature of the ultimate truth of the Supreme Person. The Abheda nature is what makes this world of multiplicity, etc., as real and meaningful. So they have They say that this is illogical. This cannot be uh, argued logically because the logic is, is based on sense experience. What is the strength of our logic? What do we logically argue? What we try to prove? It's all through our sense. So it cannot be, uh, 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 these laws, etc., cannot be brought into operation when you consider supremely powerful truth or a supreme person as Sri Krishna, who is beyond all that. And hence, uh, these are beyond the normal human understanding. At most can be said that the all these can be applied. Cause being affected and exhausted by change is a characteristic of relative causes bound by time and space. Whatever you see within the time and space, when the cause is affected and exhausted by change, what is the reality? What is the ultimate source? The source is exhausted by the change that happens. When you take original chana and make it into a rasagulla, the original characteristic of the chana qualities is completely lost in that rasagulla. It's no longer the original chana is not there, it's totally transformed. So these type of transformations are possible only in a relative world within time and space. To apply this rule to the ultimate cause, namely the cause of all causes, was a special capacity to remain unaffected in the midst of change is illegitimate and it is not logical. That's why they say is achintya, is illogical or incomprehensible by thought. By thinking, we cannot grasp the supreme nature of this reality, who can be changeless and at the same time through his power cause so much of change in and the world of multiplicity. So the that's why this is tried to be negated in the traditional Advaita by apparent transformation or this temporary transformation or illusory transformation, but all that is lost in some other thing. So, with reference to supreme reality, ignorance is dominated by another more dignified name, Maya, mysterious power of manifestation which cannot be described categorically either as Sat or Asat or as Abhava Rupa. Maya itself became the Achinta in the traditional Advaita, being both real and unreal according to Shankara Vedanta. So, what does he say about Maya? Sat Asat Anirvachaniya Maya. It cannot be explained. So, what the Bengal school of Vaishnavism, Mother Chaitanya's philosophy, calls as Achintya Bheda Abheda. So in the same way, they are also using Maya as Sat, Asat, Anirvachaniya, Maya. It's also Sat, it's also Asat. So in the Bengal situation, that Maya, or here it is a Shakti, being the power of the non-dual reality or the highest truth, namely the Supreme Person, can in no sense be unreal. It is real. That is what is Achinta. It cannot be explained, it is inexplicable. Is a relation of the identity and difference in Veda and Abeda between the non-dual reality Shaktimat and Maya, its power and manifestation or Shakti. Here, by non-dual reality, they mean that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Person or the Supreme Personality. So, being contradictory, their coexistence as one and the same entity cannot be understood logically. Because Shakti or the power of manifestation is full of duality, multiplicity, etc., subject to change, subject to decay, temporary nature, impermanent nature, anitya, etc. But as Shaktimat is eternal, supreme, Sachitananda Swarup, full of consciousness, there is no, the supreme reality is mentioned and recognized as that. So obviously, these two are contradictory. So when these two contradictions, the coexistence cannot be understood logically. So, so it's a fact of divine life revealed by scripture and independent of any logical influence. Just we see it's experience. The supreme nature of the Lord, at the same time the ephemeral nature of the world, is an experience of sadhakas. So just as a matter of in the material life, sugar is sweet, it does not require the support of logic. So those still want logical way of stating. It is an inexplicable hypothesis without accepting which the non-duality of the supreme reality and the fact of his simultaneous manifestation in many cannot be understood. See, no way can actually, that is why Sri Ramakrishna never used to discuss all this. Say that you practice, your sadhana will take you on show. How it has happened, you can never. That's why Swamiji also says about Maya, how the one became many, how this ignorance came about. He says to understand Maya, some person is in a state of delirium, high fever. In that condition, we cannot say that how this fever has come about. But once the fever is cured, the question does not arise, it simply vanishes. Similarly, as long as we are in the dwell in the realm of Maya, etc., we cannot question how this Maya or ignorance has come about. So, it has been explained more beautifully in the Chaitanya school of philosophy, where they say that you don't think of all that. You think that it is a supreme reality because it is beyond the normal sense perception, experience, etc. That reality is supreme and powerful, is not subject to the laws of this normal comprehension, thinking, etc. And it is beyond that. So, what is the advantage is, life, values, spiritual efforts, the spiritual goal of freedom, etc., are all accepted as factual. Even in the Shankara Dvaita, even the idea of mukti, etc., is all only false. You're ever free, ever mukta, Shuddha Buddha Mukta Swabhava. The idea that you are in bondage is an illusion. If the bondage is illusion, the mukti idea is also illusion. But so that means what? Whatever you see, for the average person, the normal person, is a better place to work for the attainment of the spiritual goal than under the gospel that seeks to overcome by denying its actuality. See, in one case, the supreme goal is sought to be achieved by denying everything completely and saying that it is all false. You are never under bondage, you are never under any constraint, you go beyond all that. But whereas in this, they say, no, we are in bondage, we accept that, and you work towards that supreme perfection or supreme freedom, etc., etc. So, here, the human being is realistic in his approach, and unless the means of the goal are apprehended as real, one will not put his best foot in trying to achieve it. That's why, people quite often get a wrong idea of the ultimate truth or freedom or mukti, etc. And they think that no, nothing is need to be done. We are already free. We are already mukta. Of course, says, when you, as long as you are within the realm of the body and mind, to say that you are the Brahman is absolutely uh, um, unjustified. Stop tries to say. You should never think that way. So, but if you understand Advaita like that, you read it with logic and think that all these are all necessary, that will be meaningless. To be told that there's no creation, no bondage, no spiritual real striving, no real liberation, etc., all only would sound puzzling and paralyzing inhibition to the average man with our inborn realistic outlook. We all would like to feel, when you feel the pain of a thorn that has entered into the flesh, the denial of the pain will have no effect. Sometimes say your thorn has pricked you, it is the blood is oozing out. But you say, no, nothing has happened. I have not. So will that make any sense? But we have to take another thorn and remove the one in the flesh if you have to get relief, and then both have to be thrown away. But then we recognize there has been a thorn. So this is the supreme value of this Chaitanya school philosophy, the Bengal school of Hinduism. All your striving, all your practices, all your efforts are supremely meaningful. See, then there's that is what gives impetus to your sadhana, in ethical and moral living in everything. Where if you are always the Brahman, there's no question of you are committing anything wrong. You can kill somebody and say that Brahman cannot kill. Brahman does not. Naidam chindanti sastrani. It can never be killed by any weapon or this or that. So who is to kill whom? So that kind of, all kinds of wrong understanding can happen if it is not understood properly. So this Bengal's Krishna Vaishnav is called this Achintya Bheda Abheda, gives a wonderful practical philosophy of life by which one can strive, do real intense sadhana, and reach the ultimate goal of life. So that brings us to the end of this discussion on the Chaitanya School of Philosophy. So now we shall once again take up Vivek Chudamani. But then, no, these 2 months, May and June, will not have classes. I've got so many other works also. So from July, hopefully, we will start offline, in person, in our Sharda Auditorium. Our classes would commence. Hopefully, we shall inform you in due course of time. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanastu.